And now it's Deborah Kobylt Live.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today on Deborah Kobylt Live. We have a very special guest for you today, Karen Grassle. Thanks for joining us, Karen.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Karen wrote this terrific book, Bright Lights, Prairie Dust. We're going to be talking to her about that. So she's an author. She's an actress. You would know her best as Ma on Little House on the Prairie. Such an amazing show. And also you're a woman's advocate. I mean, you do a lot of work in the women's rights community. So we're going to talk to you about that. So welcome for joining our show today.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah. Tell me, you've had quite an esteemed career as an actress. And what I'd like to know is why did you write this book?
I was semi-retired. I had moved up here to the Bay Area where I live now, across from San Francisco.
Ooh.
And I didn't have as many friends as I had had when I lived in Los Angeles. And these memories just started to come. So I thought, I'm going to write this stuff down and it'll be interesting for my son, if not for anybody else. And I'd always done some writing. So I got very interested in the process. I took a class in memoir and then I took another class and then we formed a group. And we've been writing together, this group and I, for 11 years.
Oh.
I had this great support system. And so I just kept after it and it became a book.
Mm. What is the premise? I mean, clearly the cover of the book, we've got you dressed as Ma, right? But there's an awful lot that you cover in this book, from you being a young person and starting out in the business, from being on the set of Little House and some of the stuff that went on there that affected you. So let's start a little bit about your early career. How did you get into acting and how'd you end up getting this part?
Well, first of all, I had always been a little performer. And when I was 19, I did a play in college and I just realized I have to do this. And so I quit school and I joined a theater in San Francisco as an apprentice. And I did everything from paint the sets to clean the toilets. And I just loved every second of it. I was just in love with the theater. And I knew I had found my home, Deborah. So then I did everything I could to try to become the actress that I thought I wanted to be, which was someone who could play Shakespeare or play the most modern, contemporary, avant-garde plays, who could speak well, move well, and have a lot of versatility. And I thought to do that, I needed to go back to school, which I did go back to Berkeley. And then I went on to study in London on a Fulbright grant. Yeah, so it was really an exciting time, being young and going after those goals.
Right. And when you got the role on Little House, that was sort of a shock to you, right? Tell our audience about that.
Well, I had been in the theater for a long time by the
Right.
time that happened. I'd been on Broadway, I'd worked in England, and I was kind of at the end of my rope. I'd had a couple of disappointing experiences, and I'd come out to LA to do this independent movie, and it fell through. And I had used my last money to buy that airline ticket. So I was broke. I was sleeping on my parents' couch. I was humiliated that I still was not independent. And I thought, oh, I better go back to school and get a different profession. This one doesn't seem to be panning out. And it wasn't too long after that, I got the call from my agent to go see about this new series, Little House on the Prairie, which I'd never heard of. And he said, well, Michael Landon's going to direct and he's becoming quite a good director. And I said, well, which one of the boys was he on Bonanza? Because I was so unaware of popular culture.
Right.
I didn't know who he was. But of course, when I saw him, I knew who he was.
You know, he was the young, cute one. Yeah.
You bet.
So you got the part.
Yeah.
What was that like for you? Because life clearly changed after you got the part on such an enormously popular show. I'm going to put two questions into one. What was that like for you? And why do you think this show was so wildly popular at that time in America?
Well, first of all, I was thrilled that I got to stay in show business.
Yeah.
That was the first thing it meant to me. I don't have to go back to school and become a psychologist or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very, very happy. And then I had this opportunity to learn all these new skills acting on film, which I was inexperienced at. And I thought, well, this show is going to do well because of the family dynamic, the sense of adventure, of starting a new life in a strange place, because of the community support that the town people have for each other. And I thought there was a real longing for that kind of support in our daily lives. So I did think it would succeed. And my idea of success, Deborah, was that it would probably run 3 years, which seemed to me a very long time.
Right.
And I wasn't really thrilled about that, but I thought, well, it'll help me get a reputation, a name, and get these other jobs, which will be exciting. And here we are. It's almost 50 years later, and people are still wanting to know about Little House.
I know it's kind of like being the Beatles, right? Or Paul McCartney.
Well, I wouldn't go that far.
Well, no, you know what I mean. It's like they always want to know what was it like then. So there's no doubt you were part of such an iconic show, and that will forever stay with you, right? There's no doubt about it. And there's a lot of good with that, and a little bit of the challenge, right, to sort of rub it off sometimes.
Sure, because as an actress, I wanted to play lots of parts.
Right.
And the years that I did Little House were prime years for an actress. And it did add up to about 10 years by the time we did the pilot and 8 seasons. So they were critical times in my life. But I did have so many opportunities as a result of my position on television, to go out, to meet people in the community, to promote the show, to develop new work like the film about Battered Wives, an opportunity to try to make a difference in the society. And I really treasured that.
You said the film Battered Wives. We talked a little bit about that off camera. Why did you do that film? Why was it important for you to do that one?
Well, one of the reasons is because I come from a complicated family. My dad was alcoholic. He did not beat my mother. But when a parent is alcoholic and also depressive, it makes for a lot of rough rides. And so as a person, I wanted to reach out to those families who had a rough ride. And this was a subject that would do that and would bring to light what was going on in homes all over the country that nobody really acknowledged at that time. In fact, there were only 2 shelters in the entire United States at that time. And now they are in every state and they are full all the time.
When you say 2 shelters, are you talking for battered people?
For battered wives and their children, yes.
Wow. That's astonishing that there were 2 in the country. Yeah. That is pretty astonishing. So that was an important film for you to be a part of personally and professionally. You also had your share of, incidents, right, on the set of Little House, and one that, in fact, you talk about that sort of spun you into a bit of a depression. Can we talk about that? What happened?
Sure. So Mike and I established a very, very good creative working relationship in our first season. And we were real colleagues. And that relationship was important to me. But when it was time to go back to work for the second season, it was very common, if you had a hit, for the actors to get a raise. So when I went with my attorney to talk to Mike about a raise, he refused to discuss it, and then didn't return the attorney's phone calls, and then the network wouldn't return the calls. And then Mike started to try to influence me on the set in different ways. One was to tell me the character wasn't that popular, or there needed to be parity with the girls. And I was like, the children? I mean, I have all this experience I'm bringing to the table. So I was still showing up for work, but my contract was not settled. And this went on and on. Many times my scenes disappeared, or they shot around me, different ways to make it uncomfortable for me. And the worst of that, and this went on for over a year, the worst of it was in the little house bed, in the little house bedroom. You know, we had these charming scenes where we ate popcorn and discussed the issue of the week. And they were really lovely scenes. I really liked those. But then Mike started to tell these filthy jokes about the female anatomy. And it was just, it was just awful, Deborah. I mean, I was surrounded by all these men around that bed, laughing at Mike's jokes. I mean, everybody laughed at the boss's jokes. There was one other woman, the script supervisor, sitting just to my left, and I couldn't even look at her. It was just ghastly. And I didn't know how to handle it. We didn't even have a word for sexual harassment. You know, you couldn't do it today.
Well, I was going to say, I was in a board meeting not too long ago, and while they weren't telling those type of filthy jokes, they were pretty intimidating. And to this day, and it wasn't that long ago, I still think about it. And, you know, it does continue, not as much as it did because of people like you and so many others who have spoken out, but it does continue in terms of the intimidation. Mm-hmm. And boy, do we have to be strong to not let them. And in fact, I've taken a page out of their book, and I will no longer answer someone's emails who I think has been, who is trying to intimidate, because I realize that's also an intimidation tactic. Because look, when they weren't answering your emails, right, or whatever, I guess there were no emails then. When they weren't calling back, you were probably thinking, oh gosh, do they not want to sign? What's going on? It's a perfect tactic, right, to get you to be really nervous about where you fit in.
Yes.
But you stayed strong.
Well,
sort of, right? Right, sort of.
I wouldn't say I stayed all that strong, Deborah. There was a part of me that really felt like a victim. There was a part of me that justified my drinking because, well, you drink too if you had this problem. And I rationalized that because I didn't drink at work, I only drank at home, that I didn't need to quit, I didn't have a problem. And so all of that, you know, is a vicious circle. So you get more depressed, you drink more, and your health goes down, which mine did. And fortunately, a number of events kind of catapulted together. And a friend of mine confronted me and said, Karen, you have got to do something about your drinking. And I heard her. And about a week later, I had another one of these bad nights where I was feeling sorry for myself. And I got my feelings hurt by a good friend of mine and was crying and carrying on. And the next morning I was like, that's it. I cannot do this one more time. And I stopped. I got help.
Wow.
I got help. I couldn't have done it by myself. And I didn't even know about rehab or anything like that. I just kept going to work and relying on the people who knew how not to drink.
Mm. But did it affect your performances? Because look, let's face it, you're not feeling great about yourself. You're going home and drinking. How did it affect you on the set? I mean, I wouldn't even be able to remember my lines, but I guess you could, right?
Well, it's
I get,
just astonishing to me when I see the work to
yeah.
go, really? She was able to pull that off while
Hmm.
she was going through depression and alcoholism and a contract fight. It's just astonishing to me that somehow I compartmentalized, or because I loved my profession so much. I don't know. It's just amazing.
Mm. What do you have to say to other women who are struggling, who are feeling intimidated, who don't quite see the door on how to get out? What do you say to them? Because I know that you work a lot and you speak a lot about women's rights and speaking out, and you're a real advocate for women. How do you help women? What do you say to them?
I think what we need each other, like you
Mm.
and I are talking today.
Yeah.
We need to raise this with each other. We need to find allies who understand, because it's the isolation that can really get you,
Yeah.
thinking, well, I'm stuck here in this all by myself. And we had women's rap groups in the 70s where we got together and we talked about things that none of us had ever talked about before, and began to kind of take off the blinders and take off the covers and really expose what it felt like to be a woman. And I think that has made a tremendous difference.
Mm.
That women are more trusting of each other now. But if you can find colleagues who are female, or join an organization, um, Women in Film, or the union, and get your buddies for support, because we need support. It's
Hmm.
tough.
Hmm. You speak often to women's groups, what do you say to them? Because sure, we need advocacy, but a lot of times women are afraid to speak out. You know, they could work at the local grocery chain, right? And they're really fearful.
Oh, yeah.
They work in an office, and they're afraid of getting stabbed in the back by someone.
Absolutely.
When you go to talk to people, what do you say? Do it anyway? I mean, what do you do? And how did you stand up for yourself when you were at work?
Well, I couldn't stand up for myself. I couldn't turn to Mike and say, that's unacceptable to speak like that in my presence. I did what
Wow.
I'd been trained to do. I'd been trained to rise above, to act like nothing had happened, and to get on with my job. And this business of acting like nothing has happened is not the best way out. So,
Oh,
so today we have human resources departments. That's
good.
where we're supposed to go today, right? And say,
Hmm.
look, this is going on, this is not okay. Then the company becomes liable if they allow it to continue. I think where people have the hardest time is in the lowest paying jobs, where there is no human resources or there is no union. There is nobody to go to. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know what to say about that except to
Yeah.
try to get out of that situation into a better one.
Even if it's a local church that you can go to, or even a Y. Did you know that some of the YWCA's, YMCA's even have groups? There's groups almost any and everywhere if you just try to look for it. And I know that sometimes when a person is feeling their absolute lowest, they can barely even get themselves up out of the chair to go and look. But
Yeah.
the moment you feel like you can get out of the chair and look, Just, I'm with you. You ask around, ask another woman, a nice guy, but it really is everything
Yeah.
to do that. I believe
Yeah.
that. God knows I've had my share of all of this. Um, but back to the show for a moment, because I remember, right? I'd watch that show, or even the Waltons, right? And it almost seems like it was just the perfect sort of show. And you mentioned earlier, your own personal life wasn't so perfect, right? And most of ours wasn't so perfect. And sometimes I would watch you go, oh man, that doesn't happen in my house. But do you think it was more like an escape, you think, when you watch those shows?
Well, what people tell me is that it helped them
Mm,
when their homes were more troubled, that they could imagine that they had this kind of family and that it comforted them
mm-hmm.
and that it gave them solace. And during the pandemic, people started watching it who'd never watched it before because it calmed them down.
Oh,
Yeah. So I was surprised how deeply it helped people. Oh, like latchkey kids, there was nobody home when they got home and maybe nobody to make dinner.
mm,
And they felt like Ma and Pa were there for them. It's just,
very, very interesting.
yeah.
What is a memory or two that stands out for you from being on that set?
Oh my goodness.
Whether, I know, right? Whether it was an episode or something involving the cast. Do you have a memory or two you'd love to share with us that maybe somebody wouldn't know? That's personal, private,
There were so many
right?
wonderful moments with the children, and with Mike too, just really good creative times, where we were in sync with each other and we were supportive of each other. I've left out most things about the children in my book because they were children and they
Right.
were completely vulnerable. And I wouldn't put my kids in show business, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. I had one of my sons who sort of kind of wanted to get involved. And I said, maybe the school play is a good place to start. And I'm with you because I've covered so much entertainment and I've been on sets with young kids, and people don't realize just what a long day it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's grueling. They're little kids in an adult world. And while it might even seem fun to them, right? Later on in life, they sort of scratch their heads and go, wait, what just happened? So I'm with you there, even though I don't like to, lend my opinion to what other people should do, but I'm with you. But the kids fared okay, right? The ones that were on that set.
Well, you have to ask them about that.
Are you in touch with everybody?
Yeah, we are.
Yeah,
We're very
tell us.
lucky because of all these Laura Ingalls Wilder museums and
Yeah,
historical sites. And they like us to come because we'll attract people and sign autographs. And it's good for the museums and the
right.
historical places. So that's a great opportunity for us because then we get to have like a cast reunion.
Yeah.
So it's been very meaningful over the years to have those connections. And the first one that we did was just incredible
How
because,
so? Yeah.
well, there were so many things we had never told each other.
Oh.
But now we were out of the show, the kids were grown, and people could tell their memories honestly, And I'm telling you, a lot of tears were shed as people
Wow.
let go of, years of holding on.
Wow. That's incredible. That's why I want people to pick up this book, because you've got an awful lot of stories in here. I wanted to tease them a little bit with our interview about some of what went on to this mega, mega popular show. It's almost like behind the curtain, at Little
I
House
love
on the
that,
Prairie.
don't you? I love that sort of behind the curtain show business. And one of the reasons I think people are enjoying this book is because I write about the parts of an actor's life that are not awards shows or gowns or going to lunch with famous people, but I write about what it's like to audition, what it's like to get training, what it's like to lose the job. You know, like my first Broadway show, it closed in 5 days. You
Oof,
know,
I know.
the nitty gritty of show business, or what it's like when they're building the set for a show that has not yet caught the audience, you know, to see the little house being constructed. I mean, I think all of that stuff is really fun.
I do too. When I first moved out to Los Angeles and I was covering entertainment, that may have been the most fun of all. Going behind the scenes to the little sets and the little houses, and what happens when you open the door. Half the time there's nothing back there, right? We know that, right? It's just a set. And that to me was always one of my favorites. And you're right. You talk about so much of that and more in this book. What are you working on next? What are you working on?
I've been thinking that I could do a series of stories fictionalized about behind the scenes.
Mm.
You know?
Oh,
Yeah, so still the show business milieu, but without real names so that I can be brutally honest.
oh, that's a good one. But will they be based on real people and they'll sort of flip through it and go, hey, wait a minute, that's me. Is that what you're doing?
Well, they
Because I'm
could.
thinking, really, I'm thinking of doing something similar, but I definitely don't want to use real names. I'm thinking, oh gosh, they're going to know, but oh well, it's for you to know and for them to find out, right? Okay, so and you're still acting, right? What's up next for you?
Well, I don't know. You know, things got
Ah,
off slow between my age and the pandemic, and the fact that I live up here, not in Los Angeles. So we'll have to see. I had a film open 2 weeks ago. It's called Not to Forget. It's
mm,
streaming on lots of places, so you can find it easily. And
not to forget. And what
not,
is it about?
it's about a young kid who is trying to scam his demented grandmother out of her
Mm,
riches. And I'm the
mm.
demented grandmother. And we have all these Academy Award winning actors playing rather small or supporting parts. So that lends a lot of texture to it.
Oh, that's very exciting. So we'll look for that as well. That's fantastic. Karen, I have so enjoyed having you on our show. Karen Grassle. Please, everybody, pick up the book. I think it's fantastic. Bright Lights, Prairie Dust, Reflections on Life, Loss, and Love from Little Houses, Ma. It's fantastic. There's all sorts of, as you said, behind the scenes stories about the business, about you, about your journey through sort of your lowest point, how you came back. And, the story, it's a story of women and how we have to support one another, right? In
Very
life.
much so. I think it's very much a story about women, women's lives. And I have been told by men that they like this book very much, which I'm very pleased to see.
My
But
husband took, yeah, my husband took a look at it as I was reading it because he loved the show, right? And he also thought it's not a story about women; it's a story about life.
uh,
So,
thank you.
yeah.
Thank you.
Anyway, thank you, and everybody. You can find our interview on YouTube, on Facebook, and then we put it out on IGTV, and then it's on all audio platforms. So I hope you enjoyed getting a little glimpse into Karen and her life in film and just how she overcame a lot of what she did in her life. So, gosh, I really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you very, very much. Anything you want to add real quickly to our
No,
audience?
thank you, Deborah. I do think that the book is full of hope for
Mm,
people who've had heartbreak or who feel they can't change.
yeah. And we need that, don't we, Karen? We really
Yeah.
do. Yeah. Thank you for those parting words. I appreciate it. And thanks, everybody, for joining us. And